The night the storm broke, Maddox's ranch house shook like the bones of an old ship caught in a gale. Wind clawed at the shutters, rain lashed the windows, and thunder rolled so close it rattled his coffee mug clean off the table. Just past midnight came the knock, soft at first, then louder, then frantic. Maddox grabbed his rifle, swung open the heavy oak door, and there she was, a black girl no older than 16, soaked to the bone, eyes wide with terror, clutching something wrapped tight in cloth against her chest. He promised her shelter, not knowing that what she carried would change everything for him, his ranch, and every soul in that valley. By dawn, his choice would shake the town like a gunshot. But here's the thing about promises made in the dark. You never know what they'll cost until the sun comes up. Maddox Gaines was the kind of man who didn't make promises easy. A rancher by trade, solitude by nature. Folks around Yates County said he was as steady as the fence posts he drove and twice as stubborn. He lived alone on that stretch of land, 300 acres of rolling grass and scrub since the war ended. No wife, no kin, just him. A few hands that came and went, and the sound of cattle lowing under the wide Texas sky. He'd fought for the Union, though most of his neighbors hadn't. That left a scar deeper than any musket ball could have done. Some never forgave him, some just kept their distance. Maddox figured that was fine. Better to keep his head down, work the land, and not ask favors from anyone. But on that particular night, as the storm gathered over the plains, Maddox felt a restlessness he couldn't shake. The cattle had gone spooked hours before, pressing against the fence lines, their moans carrying through the thunder. His dog, Jasper, paced the porch, ears pricked toward the darkness. Maddox was about to bed down when that knock came, quick and sharp against the wood. She looked half dead from the rain. Dress torn at the hem, shoes near worn through, hair plastered to her face. Her chest heaved like she'd run 10 miles with the devil on her heels. Maddox had seen fear before, men in battle, horses in a stampede. But this was different. This was the kind of fear that sat deep in the bones. What in God's name, he muttered, lowering the rifle just a hair. Please, she gasped. Please, sir, I just need a place, just for the night. Her voice cracked, but she held herself upright, chin lifted like she dared him to refuse. That cloth bundle she clutched, she never loosened her grip. Now Maddox wasn't in the habit of opening his door to strangers, let alone in the dead of night, especially not with half the county looking for reasons to put him on the wrong side of their whispers. But something in her eyes stopped him. They weren't pleading, they were determined. He stepped aside. Get in before the roof blows clear off. Inside, the warmth of the fire hit her, and she nearly collapsed. Maddox pulled up a chair, handed her a blanket, and set his rifle back against the wall but not far from reach. Name? He asked. She hesitated. Clara. That bundle never left her arm. She held it close like it was her last defense against the world. He noticed the way she angled her body, keeping it turned from his sight. You from town? He asked. She shook her head. No, sir. Run away. Silence. Her jaw tightened. Maddox didn't. He'd learned in the war that a man, or in this case a girl, spoke when ready, not before. Instead, he poured her a tin cup of coffee, set it on the table, and leaned back waiting. When she finally did speak, her words came low and quick, like if she said too much, the storm outside might hear. I ain't got nowhere else. I just need till morning, then I'll be gone. Maddox studied her, the flicker of firelight catching the sharp lines of her face. She was young, yes, but there was something hardened in her eyes, something that spoke of roads too rough for a child. He knew the world could be merciless. He'd seen enough bodies on battlefields to last 10 lifetimes, but to see that same kind of grit in a girl barely grown, it unsettled him. Just as Maddox opened his mouth to reply, Jasper growled low, his hackles rising. Then came the sound, a faint crunch of hooves in the mud outside. Not thunder, not cattle, horses, more than one. Clara froze, clutching that bundle tighter, knuckles white. Her breath quickened, her whole body stiff as a bowstring. Maddox reached for the rifle. Someone following you. She said nothing, but her eyes, wide and filled with the kind of terror a man can't fake, answered for her. The hoofbeats faded down the ridge, swallowed by the storm, but the look on her face told Maddox plain they'd be back. He could have thrown her out right there, could have told her he wanted no part in whatever trouble chased her through the night. It would have been the safer choice, the easier one. Instead, he heard himself say, "You've got shelter here. Whoever they are, they'll not cross this threshold tonight." She swallowed hard, tears shining in the firelight, but she nodded. It wasn't gratitude in her eyes. It was relief mixed with something else. Resolve, maybe, and that was the moment the promise bound him, not by law, not by duty, but by choice. Hours later, when the storm quieted to a steady rain, Clara finally set the bundle on her lap. She unwrapped it just enough that Maddox caught a glimpse, enough to see why she clutched it like life itself. It wasn't gold, it wasn't money, it wasn't food, it was something far rarer, something dangerous enough to bring men on horseback to his door in the dead of night. Maddox didn't yet know the full measure of it, but he knew one thing: whatever that gift was, it had just turned his quiet life into a powder keg. By dawn, word would spread that strangers had been seen riding hard through the storm, asking after a runaway girl, and Maddox would face the question every man dreads: when the trouble finally arrived at his door, would he stand by his promise, or break it before it broke him? The storm eased by morning, leaving the ranch wrapped in a gray hush. Mist clung low to the grass, and the air carried that raw smell of wet earth. Maddox stood on the porch, coffee in hand, eyes scanning the horizon. He hadn't slept, neither had Clara. Inside, she sat near the hearth, bundle still pressed against her lap, shoulders stiff as if braced for a blow. Every so often, she glanced at the window, like she expected shadows to appear on the glass. Maddox had questions, plenty of them, but he kept his tongue. A man could force answers, sure, but truth ripped out by force was worth less than silence. And besides, he already knew enough. Men had been hunting her. Hoofbeats in the storm didn't lie. Jasper lifted his head, ears twitching, then growled low in his throat. Maddox felt the prickle before he heard it. Distant riders, slow but steady, making their way down the ridge. Clara stood, bundle clutched tighter. "They're here," she whispered. Maddox didn't ask how she knew. The fear in her voice was answer enough. He set down his coffee, lifted the rifle, and checked the chamber. "Stay inside. No matter what you hear, you don't move." Her hand shot out, gripping his sleeve. "Don't talk to them, please. Just don't." Maddox looked at her, saw the desperation there. Then he shook free, stepped onto the porch, and shut the door behind him. 3 riders came into view, horses slick with mud, hats pulled low. They didn't ride like ranch hands checking fences. They rode with purpose, predators on a scent. The lead rider, a tall man with a scar running from ear to jaw, lifted a hand in mock greeting. "Morning, Gaines," he called, voice carrying through the mist. Maddox didn't answer. He rested the rifle easy in the crook of his arm, barrel low but not low enough to forget. "Storm near drowned us," the scarred man went on, reining his horse just shy of the porch. "You didn't happen to see a girl pass through here last night, did you?" The question was dressed in politeness, but Maddox heard the steel underneath. "No girl here," he said flat. The scarred man studied him. His companions shifted, restless in the saddle. One spat into the mud. "You sure about that?" the scarred man pressed. "Young thing. Dark skin. Runs quick. Carrying something she ain't got no right to. Would have been knocking doors when the rain came down." Maddox's jaw tightened. He knew better than to lie outright. It only sharpened suspicion. But sometimes a lie was all a man had. "Haven't seen her," he said. "And if I had, she'd be long gone by now. Storm would have carried her clean to the river." The scarred man leaned in his saddle, eyes narrowing. "Funny thing, Gaines. Folks say you've got a soft heart. Took in strays before. A hand here, a drifter there. Even fought for the wrong side in the war, if I recall." The insult was plain. Maddox kept his face stone still. "I run cattle," he said. "That's all you'll find here." The scarred man let silence stretch, like he was testing the weight of it. Finally he tipped his hat. "Well then, if you see her, you be sure to tell her friends are looking, and they're mighty eager to get her back." With that, he turned his horse, the others following. They rode off slow, deliberate, making sure Maddox knew they weren't gone for good. When Maddox stepped back inside, Clara's eyes were wide, hands trembling around the bundle. What did they say? That they're looking and they'll be back. Her throat worked, but no words came. Instead, she unwrapped the cloth a little more. Enough that Maddox caught a full look this time. It wasn't gold, it wasn't silver, it was a book. Leather-bound, edges worn, pages stuffed with slips of paper. Maddox frowned, not understanding at first. A book wasn't worth riding half a night through a storm, not unless it carried something more than words. "What's in it?" he asked. Clara hugged it close again. "Proof," she said, voice low. "Names, deals, things they done. If folks saw this, really saw it, they'd hang every last one of them." Maddox felt the air shift. Now it made sense. This wasn't just a runaway girl. This was evidence, heavy enough to drag men into the grave. "You stole it?" Maddox asked. Her chin lifted. "I took it because it don't belong to them. It belongs to the truth." She was fire and stone all at once, trembling one moment, unyielding the next. Maddox knew that kind of resolve. He'd seen it in soldiers who kept fighting long after the battle was lost. But he also knew what men like the scarred rider would do to get it back. "You understand what you've brought here," he said, voice sharper than he meant. "You've put a mark on my door. They'll come again, and they won't be asking polite." Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she didn't flinch. "You said I had shelter. You promised," and there it was, the weight of his own words pressing down like a yoke. That night, just as the sun dipped low and the mist turned to shadow, another sound came from the ridge. Not hoofbeats this time. A whistle, sharp, cutting, carrying far. Maddox froze. He'd heard that sound before, back in Tennessee during the war. Scouts used it to signal. "One blast, we see you. Two blasts, we're coming." This time it was one. Jasper growled, the sound deep and mean. Clara clutched the book tighter, her knuckles pale. Maddox knew then that the scarred man hadn't ridden away. He'd circled back, and now he wanted Maddox to know he wasn't alone. Maddox stood at the window, watching the horizon darken. He could still send her away, tell her to run, to take her book and her troubles with her. It would save his ranch, maybe even his life. But the promise hung there, heavier than the storm clouds before dawn. Shelter meant shelter, and if he broke his word now, what was he but another man chasing her into the mud? He turned to her. "You'll stay the night, but if they come, you do as I say. You hear me?" She nodded, silent. "Good," he said, setting his rifle on the table. "Because they will come, and when they do, we'll find out if truth is worth the fight it brings." By the next evening, the riders would return, not with questions but with fire, and Maddox would discover just how far Clara's enemies would go to silence her, and how much blood a single promise might cost. The next day dawned heavy and still, the kind of silence that doesn't last. Maddox saddled his gelding, rode fence lines, and tried to act like it was any other morning, but the truth gnawed at him with every hoofbeat. He wasn't checking fences, he was waiting for trouble. By noon the sky turned copper with dust. A hawk wheeled lazy overhead, its shadow gliding across the grass. Clara stayed inside, the leather-bound book never leaving her side. She barely touched the food Maddox set out. Every sound, the creak of the house, the scrape of branches, snapped her head around. Maddox said little. Words wouldn't soothe this kind of fear. Only steel would. It was Jasper who caught it first. The dog stiffened, nose to the wind, then barked sharp and angry. Maddox turned, following his gaze east. Smoke, thin at first, then swelling. Not the gray of a cooking fire. This was black, oily, deliberate. "Lord Almighty," Maddox muttered. He knew what it meant. They weren't coming polite this time. Fire was a message. Give her up, or we'll burn you out. Clara came to the porch, eyes wide. "What is it?" "Trouble," Maddox said. "Pack your things, quick." "I can't run," she whispered. "They'll find me." "Then we don't run," Maddox replied, voice hard. "We stand." By late afternoon, the riders appeared. Not 3 this time, 6. They came from the east, shadows long behind them, guns resting easy across their saddles. The scarred man led them, that same slow grin carved across his face. Maddox stepped off the porch, rifle in hand. Jasper bristled at his side. "Gaines," the scarred man called, voice carrying across the open ground. "We gave you a chance yesterday. Now we'll be taking what's ours." Maddox didn't answer. He leveled the rifle, steady as a stone. The scarred man chuckled. "Don't be foolish. We ain't here for your cattle. We just want the girl." Inside the house, Clara pressed her back to the wall, clutching the book. She could hear every word, each one hammering like a nail. The standoff lasted only a breath. Then one of the riders spat, raised his revolver, and fired. The bullet struck a fence post inches from Maddox's shoulder, splintering wood. Jasper lunged forward, barking, teeth bared. Maddox squeezed the trigger. His rifle cracked, the sound echoing across the valley. The rider who fired tumbled from his horse, mud splashing as he hit the ground. The others shouted, guns snapping up. Horses screamed, stamping. Smoke from the east carried on the wind, curling around them like a warning. Maddox ducked back onto the porch as bullets thudded into the walls. He slammed the door behind him. "Get down," he barked at Clara. She crouched low, arms wrapped around the book, eyes wide with terror. "They'll kill us," she gasped. "Not if I kill them first," Maddox growled, reloading. Bullets punched holes through the shutters, light cutting in. The house shuddered with each impact. Clara covered her ears, rocking slightly. Maddox crouched by the window, sighting through the crack, and fired again. One horse screamed, rearing, throwing its rider. But for every shot he landed, 5 came back. Then came the smell, sharp, acrid, undeniable. Smoke curling under the doorframe. "They're burning us out," Maddox snarled. He grabbed the water pail, dousing the flames licking at the porch, but more fire caught at the side wall. The scarred man's voice rang through the chaos. "You can't save her, Gaines. She's marked. Hand her over, and we'll leave you standing." Clara's eyes burned with tears. "I should go," she whispered. "If I go, maybe they'll stop." Maddox turned, firelight flickering across his face. "No, that's what they count on, that fear. But if you give yourself up, truth dies with you." Her lip trembled. "Why would you fight for me? You don't even know me." Maddox chambered another round. "Because a promise is worth a damn sight more than the men outside that door." He kicked open the back door, motioned for Clara to follow low. "Barn," he hissed. "Go." They darted through the smoke, bullets whizzing overhead. Jasper bounded ahead, barking furiously. Clara stumbled once, nearly dropping the book, but Maddox yanked her to her feet and shoved her forward. They burst into the barn, slamming the doors shut behind them. Maddox dragged crates against the opening, stacking whatever he could. Through the cracks, he saw the riders circling, torches in hand. They weren't letting go. Maddox saddled the gelding with quick, rough hands, then lifted Clara up. "Hold tight," he ordered. She clung to him, the book wedged between them. Maddox swung up behind, rifle slung, and kicked the gelding hard. The horse surged through the far doors, splintering wood. Shots rang out, sparks flying off the iron latch as bullets struck. Maddox ducked low, Clara's scream tearing through the smoke. They broke into open pasture, hooves pounding mud, wind whipping their faces. Behind them, riders gave chase, shouts echoing. The gelding stretched long, faster than Maddox thought he still had in him. Clara buried her face against his chest, the book pressing between them like a heartbeat. Maddox steered hard for the creek bed, knowing the rocks would slow their pursuers. Bullets cracked past them, one grazing the gelding's flank. The horse screamed but kept running. Maddox twisted in the saddle, fired a shot blind, and heard a rider curse. They plunged into the creek, water spraying. The gelding stumbled but held. Riders thundered after, torches casting wild light on the bank. From behind came the scarred man's bellow, rising above the chaos. "You can't run forever, Gaines. That girl's ours, and so's the book. You hear me? Ours." Maddox didn't answer. He spurred the gelding up the far bank, mud flying, Clara clinging tight. His only thought now was distance, putting miles between them, and the fire-lit hell behind. But in his gut he knew the truth. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. By dawn, Maddox and Clara would find temporary refuge in a canyon hideaway, but the scarred man wasn't the kind to lose. He'd rally more men, more fire, and Maddox would face a choice sharper than any bullet: protect Clara at all costs, or watch his land and life burn to ash. The night swallowed them whole. Maddox didn't stop riding until the gelding's chest heaved like a bellows and sweat shone dark against his hide. They'd crossed creek beds, cut through thickets, and finally reached the narrow cut of Red Hollow Canyon, a place few men bothered with, too rugged for cattle, too tight for wagons. The moon broke through clouds, silver light painting the jagged walls. Maddox dismounted, boots crunching gravel, and helped Clara slide down. She clung to the book even in exhaustion, knuckles white. "We'll hole up here," Maddox said, voice low. "They won't track us easy." Clara looked around at the shadows pressing in. "Feels like a grave. Better a grave than a noose," Maddox muttered. He led the gelding into a narrow alcove, tied the reins, and built a small fire shielded by the smoke would rise, but with luck the canyon walls would swallow it. Clara sat close to the fire, shivering despite the heat. At last she loosened her grip and set the book on her lap. Its leather cover caught the moonlight, scarred with age, edges darkened by sweat and rain. Maddox stared at it, jaw tight. "You said it's proof. Proof of what?" Her eyes flicked up, hesitant, then back to the pages. Land theft, names of men who forged deeds, stole farms, forced families off their ground. My daddy kept record, every deal, every lie. He was a churchman, believed God's truth should be written plain. When they killed him, they thought the book died with him. Maddox leaned in, every word sinking heavy. "And you, I found it," she whispered, "hidden under the floorboards. If folks saw this, it would ruin those men. But they know that. That's why they're hunting me." The fire popped, sparks rising like restless ghosts. Maddox understood now why the scarred man chased so hard. Land meant power. Power meant control. A little book could topple the empire he'd built from stolen ground. "Girl," Maddox said quietly, "you're carrying a fuse long enough to blow this county sky high." Clara's lip trembled, but her gaze stayed fierce. "Then let it burn." They ate cold beans from a tin. Maddox kept his rifle across his knees, listening to the canyon's silence. But inside, doubt chewed at him. He'd promised her shelter. Yes, but this wasn't shelter anymore. This was war. He thought of his land back home. The herd, the fences, the soil he'd bled to keep alive. If the scarred man came with fire again, all of it would be ash by week's end. "You don't have to stay with me," Clara said suddenly, as if reading his mind. "I can take the book and keep running." Maddox looked at her, saw the exhaustion in her face, the raw edge of hope still clinging to her voice. "And how far would you get? You're half-starved. You think they'll stop just 'cause you left my door?" He shook his head. "No, you're my burden now." She flinched at the word. Maddox softened, sighing. "What I mean is you're under my roof, whether that roof stands or not. And I won't break a promise." They slept in shifts. Maddox dozed lightly, rifle within reach. At dawn, Jasper stiffened, ears pricking. Maddox sat up, heart hammering. For a moment silence. Then echoes, hoofbeats faint, bouncing off canyon walls. Maddox cursed under his breath. They'd been found. He shook Clara awake. "Up. Now." She scrambled to her feet, clutching the book. Fear flashed in her eyes. "They can't know we're here." "They know," Maddox cut her off. "Get to the alcove. Stay low." He crouched at the canyon mouth, sighting down the rifle. Dust rose beyond the bend. Riders, at least 4. The scarred man's voice carried, mocking even through distance. "Gaines. Thought you could hide in a hole. Ain't no hole deep enough." Clara's breath hitched. Maddox steadied himself, waiting, until the first rider showed through the bend. He fired. The man toppled sideways, horse screaming, gunfire erupted, bullets sparking off stone. Clara ducked low, covering her head. Jasper barked, snarling at the canyon mouth. The riders pressed in, one slipping off his horse to creep along the rocks. Maddox shifted, sighting him, and dropped him with a shot to the chest. But another round whizzed close, clipping stone inches from Maddox's face. He ducked back, sweat stinging his eyes. "Give her up, Gaines," the scarred man shouted. "Ain't worth dying for." Maddox spat into the dust. "I've died once already. War took that from me. You want her, you'll bleed for it." The scarred man's laugh echoed cruelly. "Then bleed you shall." In the chaos, Clara crawled toward Maddox, clutching the book. "We can't hold them," she cried. "Take this, run while you still can." Maddox grabbed her arm hard. "You think I'd leave you? No. You stand behind me, you hear?" Behind me. Tears streamed her face, but something hardened in her eyes. She opened the book, flipping pages, then tore one out. She pressed it into Maddox's chest. "What's this?" he asked. "Names," she said. "Names of men in town, judges, sheriffs, ranchers. If I don't make it, you show them, show everyone." Maddox folded the paper, slid it into his coat. His heart hammered like a war drum. This was bigger than his ranch, bigger than the girl. It was the whole damn county. The gunfire slowed, riders reloading. Maddox seized the moment. "On your feet," he barked to Clara. He grabbed the gelding's reins, swung her up, then vaulted into the saddle behind her. They bolted deeper into the canyon, hooves sparking rock. Bullets chased them, one grazing Maddox's shoulder, hot pain burning through flesh. He gritted his teeth, held Clara steady. Behind, the scarred man bellowed, furious, "You can't run forever, Gaines." The canyon split ahead, a narrow trail climbing steep into the hills. Maddox spurred the gelding, praying the horse had one more climb left. Rocks clattered under hooves, the walls closing around them. At the ridgetop, Maddox looked back. The riders swarmed below, torches flickering, rage carrying in their shouts. But the trail was too narrow, too steep. They couldn't follow without risking a fall. For now Maddox and Clara had escaped. But escape wasn't victory. Maddox's land still lay behind them, his home likely already ash, and in his coat pocket burned the names of powerful men, men who would stop at nothing to keep their secrets buried. Now Maddox faced his greatest choice: carry the fight into town, or watch the girl's truth, and his promise die in silence. Maddox and Clara rode the high ridge, until the horizon glowed with the gray wash of dawn. Behind them, Red Hollow shrank into a scar of stone. Ahead, the valley opened wide, cattle pastures, the narrow streak of Whitcomb's Run, and farther still the crooked line of Yates County town. From that height, Maddox saw it, a plume of black smoke rising where his ranch had stood. His jaw clenched until pain shot through his teeth. His home, everything he'd hammered, plowed and mended, burned to cinders. Clara's voice was small. "I'm sorry." Maddox didn't answer at first. A house was timber, nails, sweat, but when a man builds alone, timber turns to memory, and memory turns to marrow. He swallowed hard. "A house can burn," he said flatly, "but land stays, truth stays." He nudged the gelding down the slope. Jasper trotted at their heels, head low, eyes bright. Clara tightened her hold on the book. Maddox could feel her trembling through his coat. "Where we going?" she asked. "Town," Maddox said. "If we keep running, they win. Best way to kill a lie is to shout it where every ear can hear." He looked Maddox over, bloodied shoulder, hat low, and then looked at Clara, clutching the book like a lifeline. "You've dragged trouble on my stoop, Gaines," Elias said. "Not dragged," Maddox answered. "Carried, and if we don't set it down here, it'll eat this county alive." Elias eyed Clara. "Girl, do you know what you're holding?" She lifted her chin. "It's names, deeds, every theft men like Rook ever signed. My daddy kept it, and they killed him for it. I won't let them bury him twice." For a moment, Elias said nothing. Then he opened the door wide. "Come in. Let's put black ink to black deeds." The press thundered, shaking the floorboards. Pages poured out, names of judges, sheriffs, ranchers, all tied to false claims. Elias stacked them high, tied them with twine, and handed the first bundle to Clara. "Spread these like seeds. Let the whole county Maddox's hand lingered on the rifle, across his knees. He knew the sound of truth carried far, but so did the sound of guns. The mid-morning, the stack of broadsides was tall as a saddle. Maddox, Clara, and Elias carried bundles across town to Preacher Pike's church, its white steeple piercing the sky. Inside, sunlight poured through tall windows. Clara laid the book on the altar, its leather scarred and damp from the storm. Pike leaned over, reading page after page, his lips pressed tight. "Dear Lord," he whispered, "this is rot dressed as law." Elias grunted, "Then we'll undress it." But before Maddox could answer, the church doors burst wide. Rook stepped in, scar pale under the sun, 4 riders at his back. His pistol gleamed like a snake's fang. "Well now," Rook drawled, "looks like the rats found a pulpit." The sanctuary froze. Clara clutched the book. Elias stepped forward, shielding her with his body. Pike's hand hovered near the bell rope. Maddox leveled his rifle, steady as stone. "Leave," Maddox said. Rook's grin split wider. "I'll be leaving with her and what she stole." He motioned to his men. The first rider stepped forward. Maddox fired. The man dropped hard, blood splattering the aisle. Gunfire exploded, pews shattering, glass raining down. Clara screamed but didn't run. Pike yanked the bell rope with both hands. The church bell tolled once, twice, 3 times, its cry rolling over the town like thunder. Doors opened, faces appeared, townsfolk gathered, drawn by the bell's alarm. The sanctuary filled with powder smoke, dust, and the raw sound of a town waking to reckoning. "He hand her over," Rook roared, pistol aimed at Clara. Instead, Clara climbed onto the pew, then the rail holding the book high. Her voice rang out clear. "They steal your land, your water, your homes, and they write it down like it's gospel. Look." She tore a fistful of pages free and flung them into the air. The wind caught them, scattering words like leaves. Townsfolk snatched them from the ground, reading aloud. "That's my cousin's claim," one shouted. "They forged my father's deed," cried another. The crowd surged, anger growing. Rook fired at Clara, but Maddox slammed into him, rifle barrel cracking his jaw. The shot went wide, tearing plaster from the ceiling. Clara fell, scrambling, but clutched the book tight. Rook staggered, eyes blazing. He leveled his pistol at Maddox. Time seemed to slow, the muzzle flash blooming. The roar deafening. Pain tore through Maddox's shoulder, spinning him sideways. Clara screamed his name, but Maddox's finger was already on the trigger. His rifle thundered. The bullet struck Rook square in the chest. His grin faltered, blood blooming on his shirt. He stumbled back, gasped, and fell hard onto the church floor. The scar on his face looked pale as chalk, as life bled out of him. His riders froze, eyes wide. One dropped his gun, then another. The crowd pressed forward, seizing weapons, binding hands. The sheriff shoved through, face pale. He bent, picked up one of the scattered pages and read. His jaw clenched. For once, the badge on his chest weighed heavier than the coin in his pocket. "This time," he said hoarsely, "the law's with the people." By noon, the courthouse steps were crowded. Elias and Pike read names aloud, one by one. Farmers shouted, widows wept, men shook their fists. The rot was laid bare in sunlight. Clara stepped forward with the book, her voice steady. "This don't belong to me. It belongs to everyone who lost their ground, their kin, their hope. It belongs to truth." She handed the book to. He climbed the belfry and slid it into the hollow of the church bell, where the sound of every toll would carry its weight. "Let it ring with truth," he said, voice breaking. When the bell tolled again, the sound rolled across fields and fences, no longer a warning but a promise. That evening, Maddox stood at the blackened remains of his ranch, Clara beside him, shawl pulled tight. Jasper nosed the ashes, whining. "You'll rebuild," Clara whispered. Maddox's gaze lingered on the scorched ground. "A house can burn, but land remembers. We'll build again." She turned to him, eyes bright with both fear and hope. "We." Maddox looked at her, really looked. The girl who'd knocked on his door, soaked and desperate, was gone. In her place stood someone forged by fire and truth. If you'll stay, he said quietly. Clara's lips curved into the smallest, fiercest smile. Long enough to see the bell ring clean. Long enough to see the gates opened on Whitcomb's Run. After that, we'll see. The sky flamed red as the sun set. The kind of red that doesn't just end a day, but begins something new. Now if you'd been there, if you'd seen the riders cut down by the weight of a book, a bell and a promise, you'd understand why folks in Yates County still talk about that day. They don't tell it as the story of a rancher or a runaway, or even of a scarred man cut down in a church. They tell it as the day truth refused to stay buried, and they tell it with one warning: a promise made in the dark can cost you everything. But sometimes, when the bell rings, that promise is the only thing that saves the life.